Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know some of you, my name is Kate. I have the pleasure of leading the curatorial department here at Oklahoma Contemporary. And we're so pleased to have you join us tonight in celebrating this exhibition. I am just getting to know Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. And through the exhibitions on our third floor, where we are tonight, including Destination Oklahoma, it offers us, including me, an extraordinary opportunity to really get to know Oklahoma and think about it through various lenses, through the work of artists affiliated or from Oklahoma. And tonight we're here to celebrate Destination Oklahoma. It features the work of 5 artists, including September Dawn Bottoms, Ghazal Ghazi, Skip Hill, America Meredith, and Don Lin Pham, and curated by our very own Pablo Barrera, as well as co-curator Liz Blood, who's contributed a zine, which I hope you each picked up as you were exploring the work. That zine expands the conversation about what it means to be an Oklahoman and the kind of cultural complexity of this place. That zine contains writing by 5 writers, poets, about works in the exhibition. So please spend some time with that. But for me, this show really raises some interesting questions about the relationship between this place and the kind of complex cultural history and present of this region at the crossroads, historically a place of movement, of people coming to and going. So please join me in welcoming to the stage the artist and exhibitions curator, Pablo Barrera. And also, before we get started, I hope you will join me in thanking our amazing teams that made all of this happen, our exhibitions team, communications, finance, maintenance. It is a team effort here at Oklahoma Contemporary. And it couldn't happen without this amazing team, nor without our supporters, our board, our members. Many of you are here tonight. We are so grateful. I want to call out a few folks who have particularly supported this program tonight, this exhibition. Those include Heartland, Ad Astra Foundation, Annie Bohannon, the Chickasaw Nation, Cox, Rand and Jeanette Elliott, the E.L. and Thelma Gaylord Foundation, Leslie and Cliff Hudson, the Kennedy family, Oklahoma Arts Council. I know there are a number of Arts Council folks here tonight. Thank you for coming. George Records, Glenna and Richard Tenenbaum. I hear folks are here. The Tenenbaums are here as well. And Velocico. Thank you to all of these folks who allow us to do everything. And also allow us to remain free for our visitors. So this is a beautiful gift and we're truly grateful. The format of tonight's evening, our talk tonight, was really inspired by Liz Blood. Unfortunately, as you can see, there's 4, not 5 artists with us tonight, and Liz is not with us either. Both Liz and Ghazal are unwell and aren't able to join us tonight. But the format, if you know Liz, you are not surprised to learn that the format of tonight's program was inspired by her, was really dreamed up by her in collaboration with Pablo and our amazing performance curator somewhere out there, Marie Casimir. The format is that we have invited each artist, including Pablo, as a curator, to dream up a word in relationship to a work. a word of that is meaningful for them in relationship to that work, and meaningful with respect to this question of what it means to be an Oklahoman, what Oklahoma means kind of culturally. And so each artist and is going to introduce their word and talk a little bit about that word and what it means to them. And then we're going to open up to you all. So I know when you walked in, you got a piece of paper, a pen. We hope that while these folks are talking about their images and work a little bit and ideas, that words will spring to your mind. And for the Q&A, we'll invite you to the mic to share that with us and the artists. So without further ado, Pablo, can I invite you, please, to share with us your word?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. And the term that I would like to discuss is the word land acknowledgement. I came to Oklahoma Contemporary in 2018 as a curatorial fellow. And in my culture, when you are a guest on new lands, it's imperative to reach out to your hosts, to pay respect to your hosts and the history of the land upon which you have the pleasure to live, work, or create. And as a result of that, I learned so much about the state. And I learned how complicated it is to give what is now popularly termed as a land acknowledgement or a welcome to country in some other places. We have an official land acknowledgement that we did in collaboration with the First Americas Museum. It's on display on the first floor. It's also on our website. And I feel that this exhibition really kind of became an extension of the work that was put into that particular statement. And one of the first things that I humbly admitted when crafting this thing was that Oklahoma contains so many stories that go far beyond what a simple statement can contain. And therefore, it was fitting to, when thinking about place and thinking about artworks that relate to place in particular, that we bring in multiple perspectives to do so. And that was sort of the motivation to select the artists and the artworks that you see on display at the moment. So I'm very pleased with the way that these artists have been able to take the beauty and the charge of the cultural connections that Oklahoma truly entails. And that let me reflect on just the past few years of working with Oklahoma Contemporary, as well as thinking about the future of Oklahoma Contemporary as an art space for all to enjoy. So when thinking about sort of the creation of an appropriate land acknowledgement, it's best to recognize that this place for thousands of years had an indigenous presence. Before the 1830s, when the Indian Removal Act brought the Muskogee Nation to this area, later the Seminole Nation as well, where it took some land from the Muskogee and gave it to them. And then during the Civil War Reconstruction era, those treaties were broken and they were therefore sort of betrayed. And that's how we ended up with the land runs and how we ended up with a mass of European descent settlers who now make up another part of the fabric of the state. And that's just to say that there are difficult, complicated, sometimes uncomfortable histories, but also sometimes inspiring histories that involve Oklahoma. And it's best to encapsulate them all and accept them all if we're really going to truly understand how layered and nuanced the state is. For example, as a result of having the Muskogee Nation, the Seminole Nations here in this area that we now call Oklahoma City, they allotted land to freed or runaway slaves, enslaved peoples. And as a result, they ceded the 60 all-Black towns, 13 of which remain here in Oklahoma. And that then opened the door for other communities to consider Oklahoma, or then called Indian Territory, as a potential home, as a place to enrich and grow as a community. So that's just a little bit of the background. And that complexity, I think, is very difficult to unpack when you're trying to give an oversimplified statement. So I'm very grateful that the artists that you see here today and their works take a very nice, layered, subtle approach to all these different histories and all these different relationships. And I think that's another key term to think about with a good land acknowledgement is relationships. The relationships that we forge here, whether for better or for worse, as complicated as they are, as simple as they may be, as obvious as they are, as subtle or hidden as they might be. These are things that kind of kept coursing through my mind as I learned about the state and my new home. And finally, the next challenge of a land acknowledgement is just to think about it as a living document. Immigration and human migration continues to this day, and it's present in the names that you see just throughout the city. For example, Automobile Alley was the ushering in of industry, an industry that was not presently here, but became part of the major par of course of the backbone of the industry here in Oklahoma. So we are an automobile alley just a stone's throw away from Deep Deuce, which was the result of Jim Crow era laws. And we're just several blocks away from the Asian district, which is a result of the Paris Accords, where during the fall of Saigon, we saw Vietnamese refugees who came and created the space. I mean, I used to live in Philadelphia, and I thought Philadelphia had the best pho until I came to Oklahoma City. And I realized, and that immediately clued me to the fact that there's a community here of a history that I'm not aware of, and that really drove me to figure out a little bit more about it. And I'm so glad that my experience here is enriched as a result of that. And then finally now at Tinker Air Force Base, as we speak, there are Afghanistan refugees who are coming in. So how will they contribute and enrich the cultural fabric of Oklahoma City? What will they create? What spaces will be made that we can all enjoy and share together? So it's an exciting thing to think about. And I think that this exhibition serves, does what a land acknowledgement does. It lets us reflect and it lets us revisit the things that we know about the space that we inhabit, and also lets us kind of ponder different angles, aspects, and facets of the very same place and get a deeper appreciation of everything that we have. So for that, I'm very grateful for the participation of these artists, and also for Oklahoma Contemporary for hosting this particular exhibition, and for Liz Blood for her work and her contributions, and the writers to just continue to add layer and depth, and to invite that kind of engagement where these are just facets and reflections. And of course, everybody here is invited to equally give the same kind of a reflection and their own projections on what they think adds to the definition and the articulation of what it means to be Oklahoman.
Ooh, beautifully said. Pablo, I'm struck as you frame yours, and this is, I will share with you, this is something that Pablo just came up, what was it, yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is just, we were talking about land acknowledgement and what Pablo was gonna say, and he kind of realized that these things are deeply connected. And I'm really struck by, as you're describing it, in some sense, your exhibitions here on the third floor over time, over the last couple of years,
Yes,
have in a sense been a real extension of a land acknowledgement, of an exploration of your own, and an exploration for us. So really beautifully said and encapsulated. Thank you for,
Kate. Yeah,
for sharing that.
I also think it's important to mention that the artworks themselves just encapsulate that feeling of when art has this power to help us rethink the things around us in a contemporary sense. And that's really just what kept ping-ponging in my head as I thought about this word land acknowledgement. It's meant to be something that continues to evolve, continues to articulate, and art helps us do that so effectively.
Yeah.
And much gratitude to Liz Blood too for the idea of ekphrasis from her editing, and also from the zine that she provided, this idea to sort of revisit things we see with words that we speak.
Yes. Well, let us turn to the art. Absolutely. We're going to go in alphabetical order, which is not the order of the stage. So bear with us. But September Dawn Bottoms was born and raised in Paden, spent a long time in LA, has moved back to the region of her birth, living in Tulsa. And it sounds like has created a really rich life for yourself, photographing in multiple contexts, including really exploring the region through commissions by publications such as Time Magazine, and other opportunities that have allowed September to explore some of the questions that Pablo just mentioned, I think, and many more, through portraits, and exploring the use of photography and combining it with other materials. So I know you've seen her two photographs outside in the exhibition, along with the video. I think one of the fascinating things about your work to me is the diptych format, or the tension between elements in your work. And September's work has been published, as I mentioned, by Time, Wall Street Journal, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, many other publications. And in 2020, September was selected for a fellowship by the New York Times. So September, tell us about the work you selected, which is one of the three by you in the show, one of the even more, they're all enigmatic. This is one of the more enigmatic ones to me. And the word "not."
Hey y'all. I wrote something down because I've done this before and I'm a bit of a rambler and I didn't want to just go off course. So this is an image taken from my hometown in Paden of just some forest land on fire. I have no clue why. I was driving back from photographing in Boley and I saw that and I pulled over and photographed the fire. And it's layered with an image of my grandparents. In the top right corner, that's my grandmother and my grandfather who are sharing an embrace. And on the left-hand corner, it says, "Bless the food beside us." Bless the food before us, the family beside us, and the love between us. It was just like a little note that I had found in my grandmother's corner. I came back to Oklahoma to I have a knot in the pit of my stomach from all of our intergenerational trauma, not to, trigger warning, I suppose, but my grandfather molested my mother from the time she was 2 until she married my father. And that was something that was incredibly hush hush within our family. People knew, but nobody addressed it. No one helped her. And that pattern continued within my family for years and years. And so I kind of came back to try and understand why and to try and untangle myself from that pattern. So I'll just read you a little thing that I've written that I hope metaphorically explains a little bit about what's going on. I have a knot in the pit of my stomach. It smolders my insides and drags me down everywhere I go. It singes every relationship I have. It coils, chokes, and chars my career, my confidence, and my ability to function. I'd like to blame it on my mother, the woman who didn't care about my well-being, the woman who let me and my brother get hurt over and over again. But I know all of the responsibility of my pain, of my knot, does not fall on her shoulders. A knot burns deep in her too. A knot infests the bellies of my grandmothers and my grandfathers and brothers and sisters. They're blindly entwined in it, passing it down and down and down again. I came back to this red dirt land to follow the generations of tangled twine, to untether myself from its devilish grip. I remind myself, we were meant to be cherished, with fragile pink skin and eyes full of wonder, covered in angel kisses. But we are damaged goods, wearing the battle scars of those who came before us. We've passed along our pain like we've passed along our land, and now we bury it deep into our hardened red clay hearts. Maybe I'm looking for forgiveness. Maybe I'm looking for hope that one day someone will gently bathe our wrinkled skin and feed our hungry souls. Maybe I'm looking for hope that one day someone will count our pills one by one and lay us down to rest with dignity and hushed whispers. It is coming for us all, our sins and our knots be buried with us. So when I came back and I started speaking with my brother about our past and trying to understand what was going on with our family, he's here today, by the way, he's right there. He opened up to me that he was molested as a child by the same person that molested me. And we had gone my 28 years of living, never speaking about this, never knowing, never healing. And I just, I want to untangle this and I want it to stop and I want to address it. And that's what a majority of my work is about. Yeah, that probably wasn't 6 minutes.
It had the weight of many more minutes. Yeah. Well, I think we're all thinking about you and your brother and your family, and also how even if we didn't know about what you what have all gone through, I think a testament to the strength of your work is that it holds that, even without the stories, that it holds that tension, it holds that sense of fiery kind of trauma, especially amongst generations. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. Yeah. Well, oh, this is going to be a heavy night, huh? Let's hear from Skip Hill. I know many of you know Skip, Texas-born Skip Hill, North Padre Island-born Skip Hill, but based in Tulsa. And we know Skip's paintings and their varied cultural references. I was just sharing with Skip a bit ago that we had a beautiful conversation in front of, we as a staff had a beautiful conversation, one of his paintings about how they're both of this place and of a kind of an internal place, as you described it. But the references are varied, that it's active in there because there are many references from the art historical canon, folk art, tattoo culture, Asian calligraphy, West African sculpture. This particular piece Skip was sharing came out of some time he spent in Brazil. Maybe he'll share a little bit more of that. Skip's work has been featured on CNN, Black Entertainment Television. His work is part of the state capitol's Betty Price Gallery, Oklahoma State Art Collection. Skip, please illuminate this word, this painting.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks for all of you for being here. What a wonderful opportunity to, even though I live in Tulsa, I think my homies out here will recognize that I'll always be OKC. It's wonderful to see friends, and my friends are my family, so it's wonderful to see all of you here. And it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about my work. You know, of course, people who know me know that I can drone on and on for a while. So the challenge of keeping it under 6 minutes is, ooh, we'll see how we go. The word that you see there on the right, beloofde land, beloofde land. That's a Dutch word. It means promised land. Why not put promised land, just use the word promised land? Well, I used the Dutch word, and actually per Pablo's suggestion, to kind of add yet another layer to what does it mean to be Oklahoman, to be an Oklahoman. For me, a big part of being an Oklahoman has been not wanting to be in Oklahoma, right? That was a big part of it. Certainly, I was a reader and I was a writer and I like movies and I like film, and living in Oklahoma, all I could see was being in LA, being in New York, being in Paris. It's what we all, as young people, young creatives in particular, envision when you grow up here. And I imagine it's the same in Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska. But for me in particular, I just had this vision of what I wanted to do with my life, and it didn't involve Oklahoma, right? And so there was always this sense of wanting to be someplace else, and that the key word being place. And so I had it in my mind at a certain point that I'm leaving Oklahoma, I'm never coming back, I'm done. I loaded up my car, drove out to LA, looked in the rearview mirror a couple of times, and I was never coming back. How many people in this room can say they did that as well? Show of hands. Part of what I hope to bring with this conversation is the idea that there's so many people I've met, particularly creatives, because that's my crew, that's my family, that's my world, is creative people, whether you're writers, dancers, musicians, artists, is this yearning to be someplace else. And I had a wonderful conversation with a man whose name, if I dropped it, everyone in this room would know. And I was delivering a painting to his house in Tulsa, and I was moaning and groaning about being in Oklahoma. This is after having been in Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Holland, and then everywhere through Holland, all the way to North Africa, all with the intention of never coming back here. And yet time and time again, this place, this red dirt, this experience here drew me back. And in the course of this conversation, he said to me, you know, you can go any place else. You can go a whole lot of places. You can go to New York, make a stand in Brooklyn, whatever. You can go all kinds of places. He says, but you know, there are a lot of people like you in those places. A place like here, like Oklahoma, that's a place where you could really make an impact because there are not a lot of people necessarily like you. And that weighed on me, and I thought about that, and I respected this person enough to really consider what he said. I know when my family moved to Oklahoma, it wasn't a promised land. My mom had married a guy who was from Oklahoma, and so we were coming here for the first time. I was about 11 or 12 years old. I remember we cried all the way out here because we thought it was just going to be tumbleweeds. We really had it in our minds. It was like, okay, man, there's going to be Indians, teepees, that part's cool, but tumbleweeds, and it's just going to be kind of like a desert, which shows you what we knew about geography. When the fact of the matter is, Oklahoma is really, truly, geographically, it's not the South, as much as people want to say the South, but it is. It's not the West, but it is. It's not the East, but in many ways that it is. What's beautiful about this place is that it is, in fact, a crossroads of all of that. I think the most fascinating thing as I've gotten older is to realize the breadth of human experience and peoples that have contributed to Oklahoma. And when we talk about history and the difficult parts of talking about history, you know, growing up in Oklahoma and going to school in Oklahoma and studying history in Oklahoma, you're really done a disservice by not speaking to the breadth of all the peoples that have been here, that have contributed here, that were transitional, that settled. I was an adult before I really knew anything about the Tulsa Race Massacre. I get it why you wouldn't want to teach that, but I also get what a disservice it does to the people, Black people who immigrated to Oklahoma, there were people who went to the South who were calling for Black people to come to Indian Territory. There's a whole new life. This place, in escaping the South, this place will be a promised land. And so for many people, it was portrayed as a promised land, and it was a place of hope. It was to be an Eden of sorts. And so I touch on this briefly with this piece. It's pretty loaded. And again, people look at this and it's like, well, that doesn't look like Oklahoma. Oklahoma, it's really more, this piece is really more of an interior space of aspirations and hopes, an Eden, if you will. The birds, for me in this case, represent witnesses. Anything floral represents hope. It's more aspirational than it is illustrative. And I use the word beloofdeland because it is a Dutch word, and I lived in the Netherlands. I thought that would be home for me, that would be my promised land. I was prepared to live my life there. I speak the language fluently. I read it, I write it. And so I was challenged with, rather than say promised land, why don't you introduce something that kind of adds just an element of your experience of being elsewhere? And that would be the word, but the word beloved also touches on, you can see the root of belief, the word belief. And this is a state where clearly faith and family and plays a big role here. And that's always what's brought me back. My family has always brought me back, even when we don't get along, even when we're like warring with each other, to be able to see them. And I got to a point where I realized my kids, my brothers and sisters are having kids, and I'm living on the other side of the world from them. And I wanted to see them. I wanted to be a part of their growing up. I wanted to contribute. And I think ultimately as an artist, particularly a creative in a place like Oklahoma, it's a mission, if you will. It's a mission that requires sacrifice. The whole idea is to be the creative person, be the artist that I needed when I was going to school in Oklahoma in junior high school. Be someone who, in a small town, Pauls Valley, Gotebo, wherever, that I've all these different places where I've gone and done workshops and worked with kids and artists in residence programs. That was all about empowering creatives in a place where that can really be challenging at times when you live in small rural communities. And to have this guy come through, in many cases, Black, going into predominantly white rural areas and bringing my magic, my creative magic, and my belief in the ever potential in the state, and more importantly, the potential in the people here. And so it's wonderful, you know, there's all kinds of communities here that weren't there when I was growing up, when I was a kid. And so I've seen where this has really become again, for a lot of people, a promised land for the people coming from, you were just mentioning, from the Middle East, from Afghanistan, from Syria, I meet people from all over. Iran, I had a really good friend at the time in my life who was from Iran. And so I think for me, Oklahoma is more than cowboy hats and buffalo. It's so much more than that. That's almost kind of a tired image of what this state is. And I think in many ways we are still trying to figure it out, what it is. But for many people, it's a promised land. And if I'm sitting here talking to you today, it's been a promised land for me as well, because I made a promise to share my art, share my creativity, empower, inspire, and that's my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Yeah. Belief, this Eden you've created. Thank you for sharing about that. America, let's turn to you. America Meredith, an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation based in Norman. Her paintings, of which you see 3 in the exhibition on found material, I think is a really important part of them. These road signs, we had a really interesting conversation about the road signs and the layers of Native American pop culture imagery, and how these layers and references approach social and environmental issues. America Meredith's work was part of the Hearts of Our People Native Women Artists exhibition organized by the Minneapolis Institute of Art, which traveled across the country. And America was a 2009 Artist Fellow of the National Museum of the American Indian and is editor of First American Art magazine. America, tell us about this work and your word.
All right, I'm trying to get my head timer to go. Okay, cool. So I mainly edit and publish First American Art magazine, so I'm like trying to convey information. So I tend to break things down as simply as humanly possible. So sometimes I opt for the obvious. And I do think when we're, especially within the state of Oklahoma, when we're talking about this area, there is that fiction, and I really appreciate everything you said, Pablo, that no one lived here, that it's new, and this is on the sign lands. And now you're unpeeling these layers. So it's like, oh my God, this was promised to Muskogee Creek Nation, Seminole Nation. Before that, there were people here. It's amazing how old some of the archaeological sites are here. And I've talked to some of the archaeologists involved in Western Oklahoma by the book. So when they're pulling up these 2,000-year-old sites, like it was done by the book. But so we had, before pandemic, we had a Native artist group here and it was very intertribal and we could never come up with a name. We'd meet once a month, eat tacos. We could never name ourselves. But we're like, well, what is it? What is the essence of this place? Well, we're the center of the center. And from Native communities, Oklahoma, was the site of forced relocation. So we have tribes here that are from the West Coast. You have the Modoc tribes from Oregon and California, and you have Seneca Cayuga that are from New York. You have the Seminole, they're from Florida. So this triangulation, all these tribes, coast to coast, are here. So what an incredible opportunity, blessing. And I think it was Gail Bird who said, and they taught us all the same language. English was forced upon us, but now we can all communicate to each other in the same language and we're all here together. So that's really intense and powerful that Oklahoma is, and that's the way this continent used to be, north, south, east, west. There was tribes mingling and, every group is always defined by its neighbors. You go to war, you're intermarried, you're pushing and pulling, you're dancing together. And that's how we define ourselves. So it's really an incredible blessing that we have this diverse intertribal push-pull that's still organic and live today, because of course our history has never stopped. We keep evolving as people. And I moved here most recently. I moved back and forth all the time. Yes, when I turned 18, I got the hell out. I went to San Francisco. I'm like, bye, I'm never coming back. But then in the 90s, I started spending summers here in 106-degree heat and all the grass fires. And then winters in San Francisco with all the rain, I could have totally shared. I could have easily done a share. But gradually it grew on me. I saw what was so powerful. And my father, who has passed on, he's walked on, he taught Oklahoma history. And he was like, this place is fascinating. We're like, you're high, Dad. But he would teach the real history. So after I went to Institute of American Arts, I took my father's classes down at USAO, amazing affordable school in Chickasha, Oklahoma. And we learned Southern Plains history and we went weeks before we went to European contact. The knowledge here is mind-bending. So to my painting, I always was afraid, doing that drive back and forth to Santa Fe, that flat area, I'd always be like, what if my car breaks down? I'd be completely agoraphobic. So my sister moved to Loyal, Oklahoma. Y'all might know it. It's population 70. And I got kind of obsessed by it. And I was in San Francisco Art Institute, which is the most elitist school I've ever been to. They really prided themselves on not having any applied art, and that's just not my personality. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna paint cows, and I just kept painting cows and I kept painting barns and I just kept doing it. But finally people kind of backed off. They're like, all right, you're on a mission. So I really explored Western Oklahoma. I'm not from there, I'm Cherokee. And I'm actually descended from people who came here before the Trail of Tears. So there's 7 generations of my family buried in Chelsea, Oklahoma, but I still appreciate that I'm a guest here. My people are guests here. So this is me as an outsider looking at Arapaho culture, because Loyal, Oklahoma is on Cheyenne and Arapaho lands. And that is their symbol. You'll see it on flags and different things for their creator, and then the hand of creator. And that's a beautiful Arapaho song, and it's reminding. And sometimes things get translated in cliches, but the idea that you do everything for 7 generations, that's very much overused, but it's also real, that you have to weigh all your actions thinking about the future. And of course, this poor child, is not super excited about what he's being promised. But it's also this idea that tribal people travel. We're not like serfs. We were never pinned to the ground. There were recorded Native people that walked coast to coast. There's a Tlingit person that walked to the East Coast. So we got around, and that's an interesting, beautiful thing where your tribal affiliation doesn't fall off. Like when you leave home, you always carry home with you. So that's the idea of the center. And the Sundance, I stole this. It was skaters in my neighborhood were using it as a ramp. So I feel sorry. I'm sorry, but I absconded with their sign because I kept finding signs all over my neighborhood. So it was all about being, I was a bike messenger, experience it, mobility, but also that staff. So at the Sundance, you have that pole, and that is the center of the world. And tribe to tribe to tribe, our ceremonies are all very different. They all change, but there's this idea, the axis mundi. And at that time, you are completely connected to the entire universe, and where you're at is the complete center of the world. And Pablo, I didn't go with his suggestion. I'm like, no, because you recommended using Cherokee. And I was like, well, but this isn't our center of the world. Ayeli is a Cherokee word for center. Our center is Gadua, mound. And that's where our creator gave us the law. And that is now in Cherokee hands, the Eastern Band Cherokee hands. If you get a chance to go there, it's so beautiful. But it's there in North Carolina. And luckily we can go back to there. But then I thought about it, and we're so lucky to have our dances still. We have ceremonial grounds. So those mounds and that fire is a center. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm completely wrong. And you're absolutely correct that we do. We've made our own centers of the world. So that's my story.
Beautiful, America. These words are stacking up to mean so much about where we are. Don Linh Pham was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and is based in Tulsa. Her prints and drawings, you see two in the exhibition, are extraordinary. They're just beautiful, delicate explorations of generations, of migration, of socialization, construction of culture, how that happens over time and place, specifically for Asian American women living in the Midwest. Don Linh Pham operates the Still Mill Collective in Tulsa and is a contributing artist for the Dom Bocks Foundation's recent initiative featuring 12 Vietnamese diaspora illustrators and artists. Don Linh Pham, please share with us, apologies, please share with us about your work and word.
So I'm sort of a rambler as well, so I hope you guys don't mind I read you something that I wrote. My work acts as a visual diary for me, and I've always felt more comfortable sharing my thoughts through visual imagery and written words rather than spoken. I formulate a lot of my concepts and writing before I even start sketching an image, and then I work to find a visual vocabulary to express my concept. So I hope you don't mind that I read to you my thoughts. The prompt for this talk is to choose one word that defines what it means to either be in Oklahoma or to come to Oklahoma. The word that I chose is An Don, which means safe or safety in Vietnamese. And I would like to talk about that in the context of my piece, Thank You, Bà Nội, which means thank you, grandmother. I think about it as different definitions of safety and what my parents saw as safe, moving to Oklahoma versus my definition of safe as a child. For my parents, what safety meant for them is economic stability, seeking more opportunities in a form of higher education, higher paying jobs, and solidifying a foothold in the United States. When we lived in Vietnam, my parents experienced a lot of discrimination because my grandfathers on both sides of the family aided the United States during the war. And my grandfather on my dad's side was a prisoner of war for over 5 years. And due to that, my parents were restricted from attending certain collegiate programs or advancing in their careers after the war. And that drove them to jump on the opportunity to accompany my grandfather when he was able to immigrate to the United States as a refugee. My parents tagged along with him as refugees to seek a more stable life, and we ended up immigrating to California together. And we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with my grandparents, my parents, my brother and I, and 2 of my uncles. When we were in California, my parents both worked nonstop, trying to pay the bills and make ends meet. And because it was a high cost of living there, we were forced to live in a high crime area that wasn't the best for raising children. So whenever my parents were working long hours, my grandmother would take care of me. I formed a really close connection to her, and she became my sense of safety. Several years later, my parents decided to move to Oklahoma because they were working so much. They didn't have time to spend with us and wanted to improve our quality of life. We moved to Oklahoma seeking opportunities for my parents to advance in their careers and enable our family to grow and create a foothold in the United States where we could prosper rather than just get by. For my parents, moving to Oklahoma was their sense of safety. That was their opportunity to establish what they wanted from an economic perspective and to create a secure environment for my brother and for me to grow up. But for me, I was moving to Oklahoma and I was moving away from my sense of safety and emotional safety, which was my grandmother and my connection to my grandmother and my other family members in California. I was moving to kind of what to me was a strange place where I was different to my peers in school, and I was leaving a community of a large Vietnamese population to one where there are very few Vietnamese people. In Oklahoma, the people looked different than me, the food didn't taste familiar, and the customs seemed to be the opposite of what I grew up learning. My piece, Thank You Bà Nội, shows me reaching out for safety. And that's in the form of a phone call to my grandmother. She was my source of comfort whenever I was growing up in California, and she was my anchor to my community back home, my family, my culture that I came from, and those kind of familial senses of safety. And Thank You Bà Nội, it depicts the past and present view of my connection to what I saw as safety in my family and my community. The print depicts me as a young girl calling my grandmother and just being able to talk to her where she can comfort me and make me feel safe in my new home of Oklahoma, where I felt so different and things were a little strange compared to what I was used to. And there are smaller depictions of that connection or that phone call or what that phone call has transformed to in the present day. My grandmother passed away, so what's depicted in the smaller boxes are my family altar to my grandparents. In our culture, we believe that our ancestor spirits continue to wander the world and should be taken care of and invited to visit. Death anniversaries are sacred times where we focus on the happiness and good that the person brought to the world. The burning of incense is a way to welcome your ancestors and their spirit into your home. Odd numbers are considered lucky in Vietnamese culture, so we burn 3 incense to the altar and bow 3 times. The yellow chrysanthemums are typically used to decorate the altars of family members during Tết, which is Lunar New Year, and to welcome our ancestors into the new year and are representative of a harmonious family. So in present day, it is now me welcoming my grandmother and grandfather to what is now my home in Oklahoma. The butterflies are a symbol of transformation and my transforming perspective of what it means to be connected to my family and what it means to be connected to my culture. Thank You Bà Nội represents my transforming view of what home and safety means to me now. Now I see Oklahoma as my home and my sense of safety. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing. These words are so rich: land, acknowledgement, home, center, belief. We've learned a lot about family, about culture. And I want to invite the audience in the few minutes we have left to join in the conversation. There's a mic here coming to the center, so you don't need to wait. You can just come up and share with us any words that have come up to you as we've been talking. So while someone's unleashing their shyness to come up, any questions or thoughts that are occurring amongst you all for each other? Pablo, I know your mind has been going. I've been
very inspired by the works from each of you, and just recently, even just now, Dan, when you were talking about this idea of safety and you talked about butterflies, the word cocoon popped into my head, and I couldn't help but think about the visual language that you're using, where you have these beautiful moments that have to do with your family altar that are almost encapsulated, almost like they're cocooned in these spaces, only connected through the butterflies that kind of go between the different boundaries of the color fields. even some of them flaunting the edges of that blue field. And I was thinking about how that cocoon is a sense of safety, but there's also this blossoming and this transformation that needs to occur to get to the next stage of existence. So it's interesting to think about how you define safety as a child, how your parents define safety. And I'm just curious, did safety become redefined for you over time as you became more accustomed to Oklahoma? Was this something that became safer? Did you change your ideas on safety? Did you just like evolve and transform your thoughts on safety?
It has evolved, definitely. It's like what Skip and Meredith has talked about. It's like I grew up wanting to leave Oklahoma, and I wanted to seek like somewhere with a larger Vietnamese population and somewhere where I felt understood. But I think the older I've gotten, the more I felt like Oklahoma was my home and where I felt understood. And it's like Skip said, it's like you can go to a place where you can be one of many, but I think staying here and then just being able to have these conversations with people about like your culture, and I don't know, that creates a sense of safety because I think people are willing to listen. And yeah, I think Oklahoma, it has definitely transformed.
Yeah, I think that home is something that has kind of home and family and a place to explore and space to do that and people to do that with seems to be running through each of the thoughts that you all have shared with us tonight. Do we have any questions or words from the audience? I think we've been given so much to explore tonight. And I know it's leaving us all with a tremendous amount to think about what it means to be an Oklahoman and to leave and come back, to come to and the varied kind of strands that make up this culturally complex place. So thank you each for sharing so much about your work, sharing your work with us, sharing your thoughts about your work, and how you think about Oklahoma. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope you'll enjoy the exhibition, and I'm sure each of the artists will be happy to speak further. Thank you all very much.